Messiah a specific person? Is there an identity to Messiah? Can it only be one person? So Maimonides continues. He says, no. And if a king will arise from the household of David, who is studious in the Torah and is involved in the commandments like his father David, according to the written law and the oral law, so he has to be a king. And what does he do? He studies Torah and is involved in the commandments and as they are written and explained in the Torah law or law. And then he has to go ahead and influence all of Israel to go in the ways of the Torah and to strengthen the breaches, the places where things are weak. And then he has to fight, be willing to fight the battles of God. If he does so, it is assumed that he is the Messiah. However, it's possible he won't be. If he did so and he was successful, and then he built the temple in its place and gathered all the exiles of Israel, then we know for sure that this is the Messiah. After he does so, he will actually bring tikkun olam. He will correct the whole world to worship God together. For it says, for then I will transform all of the nations into a clear speech, that they will all call out in the name of the Lord, the name of God, and worship him in one manner. And so, the first question is, what does it mean that a king will arise from the household of David? Why does he say these words, from the household of David? What's so important about the household of David? And why does he say, if a king will arise? Why does it say a man will arise? Why is it a king? The two critical factors here. A king is not just an elected official. He's not a good politician that gets elected and can read a teleprompter. A king is a man, number one, who feels that he is above the common person, that he is not intimidated by anything. A king must be a man of great courage, who has no fear. And why does he say it's from the Davidic dynasty? Because the nature of King David was not to fear anything at all except for God. David was in that way even superior to Moses. We find that Moses, when confronted by a poisonous snake, ran away from the snake. David, on the other hand, did not run away. When confronted by the bear or by the lion, actually stood back to try to figure out how he can save his lamb from these predators. So David, by nature, had no fear of anything other than God. Moses had no fear, but it was not a natural fearlessness, but a fearlessness that was conditioned. And so, a king, meaning someone who is not intimidated by anything, who feels there is no one above him except for God. And as a result of that, he has no fear of anyone, man or angel, or creature, or power. He has no fear of anything other than God himself. And that's indicative that he is from the Davidic dynasty. And then he has to be a person who's diligent in the study of Torah and performs the mitzvahs. And not only does he perform them, it's his business. He's involved. He wants to see these things get done. And he brings the Jewish people around to do exactly as he does. And then he has to build the temple in Jerusalem and gather all of Israel. Why are these details so necessary? First of all, he has to be from the Davidic household. So for those Christians out there, you have two genealogies that are claimed to have some kind of connection to Jesus, that he comes from the Davidic household. They're patently false. Number one, because they just deal with Joseph, who supposedly is not his father. They contradict each other. Tremendous gaps between the two genealogies. Not only do they contradict each other, they also contradict the genealogies in the Book of Kings, which is where those kings are mentioned. There's a reason for that, and Christians are not willing to admit the reason. The reason is because the Gospels were written by ignorant people who, when they said the thing, it became recorded. And because it was recorded, it couldn't be changed afterwards. But the Gospels were written by people who were quite ignorant. There are many hundreds, if not thousands, of contradictory statements in the Gospels that don't make sense. They contradict other statements in the Gospels or things that are mentioned in the Torah, in the Tanakh. And this indicates that this was not a very sophisticated group of people. And this leads me to the other part of it. Jesus was not from the Davidic household. He didn't have this fearlessness naturally. And that's why he thinks out twice. When being asked whether he's the king of the Jews, he doesn't say, yes, I am. If you are the king, be proud of it. Secondly, why does he tell God, why have you forsaken me on the cross? Akiva, what does he do? Rabbi Akiva says the Shema when they're tearing his flesh with iron combs. Not a less painful death than the crucifixion. Probably a more painful death. Crucifixion was quite common. They left him out to die. And he would just expire in the elements. Rabbi Akiva's flesh was being torn from his body by iron combs. What does he do? He says the Shema and passes his soul out in purity. Doesn't complain. I mean, nobody would listen anyway, I guess. But he doesn't complain. But rather he accepts the judgment of God and gives back his soul in purity. And he becomes a pure agent for good for all times. So he was not of the Davidic dynasty, which is the reason why he had fear. And he did not bring the Jewish people to fulfill the commandments, because he himself was not someone who was interested in doing the commandments. He himself violated some of the commandments in the Gospels themselves. So if you violate the commandments yourself, you can't expect that you're going to teach others to fulfill the commandments. Nor was he a scholar of Torah, as clearly the Gospels are filled with contradictions that contradict what is written in the Torah. It's obvious that it's misquoting. Third element, he didn't get the Jewish people to accept the Torah and to perform it, nor did he build a temple. And if you're going to say the temple was there, he certainly didn't strengthen it. Didn't gather all of the ingatherings. There were millions of people of Jewish faith who lived in Babylon, Alexandria, in Egypt, in Cyprus, and other places. Millions of them. Most of them lost their lives in the revolts. But there were millions of others. He never gathered those in gatherings. And so, if he was a candidate for Messiah, he's certainly a failure. As we'll soon see in the next section of Mashiach.